minutes. Yes, yes, class. We were discussing in the last class about the space law, the Outer Space Treaty. Let me share the slides again. And we were to discuss the last part of usage of remote sensing, nuclear weapons, and other military activities which are non-permissible under the space agreements, and what are the various conventions related to, or you can say rather the draft principles that are related to these contentions. So as far as our classes, uh, the thing which I want to discuss in today's class is about your third NCP. So probably I have kept the date for your third NCP around 13th of November. Let me just confirm once. Yes, 13th, no, 12th of November, sorry, Friday. That your timings again the same, like 3 to 4 for our class, which is set. Is it all right for you all?
Ma'am, once again, could you repeat the date and portion for our NCP, ma'am? Just now I joined, that's why I asked.
Okay, no problem. It's on 12th November. I'll post it on the Teams group as well. I just wanted to inform you regarding this. Don't worry, don't panic about this, right? And so the portion that I want to be inclusive is probably your whole of the units, excluding the last unit. Okay.
Unit, ma'am, that is unit 10.
Yes, excluding the unit 10, 1 to 9 will be your syllabus. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am.
So we'll be starting with our probably the third last unit today, and we'll be discussing a brief about the introduction. Let me just finish with this topic first, the conventions that we were discussing in the last class. Okay.
One more thing I want to ask.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, what about our NCP and mid marks?
Yes, I will let you know in this week itself. I have to submit it by today. So probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'll let you know the marks. Don't worry. So about the topic which we were discussing about the space law, we were discussing about freedom of exploration. We discussed about the Space Treaty of 1967, if you all remember, and we were discussing various international conventions that are related to the space agreements, various space agreements in regards to liability, registration, right, and rescue operations of astronauts. Students, am I audible? Right? Is there any contradiction in the voice?
No, ma'am. Your audible is clear, ma'am.
Okay, perfect then. So in this, we had to discuss the fourth point, that is the draft principles on remote sensing, usage of nuclear power, and prevention of arms race. So as far as if you remember, you might have heard about, you know, the space Unispace and 1, Unispace 2, and Unispace 3. So these are the outcomes of these draft principles. Basically, Unispace 1 and 2 and 3 are the conventions which were to be, which were executed in regards to control the military activities, or you can say to control the danger of nuclear war, and in order to secure various developing countries, in order to protect the in order to prevent the superpowers to have another World War III that would be exploding the whole earth in its totality. And outer space and harmonizing humankind and mankind and keeping a check on space activities is all the more very important. So these draft principles made an effective communication, made an effective implementation of launching such satellites which are beneficial for the mankind, instead of launching any military activated nuclear weapons or missiles to that context, satellites containing nuclear missiles that are a threat to the humankind or mankind. So it was accumulated decisions and through various negotiations, and you can say acceptance and parting of various countries and nation states in that context, they wanted to draft principles on remote sensing. And again, that is a point which is very relevant about remote sensing. So, remote sensing should be done irrespective of any degree of economic conditions, maybe social conditions, or maybe they are technologically or you can say scientifically backward, or maybe the developing countries in that context. These principles are for those activities which are to be conducted in accordance to the international law. International law should be that these rights, the legitimate rights of the developing countries, should be checked upon. The countries who are underdeveloped and are developing in nature should be able to have being sensed as state entities and should not be kept under control or kept under sensory parts without their permissions, or maybe for any threats, etc. So remote sensing should be done in order to protect the natural environment of Earth, to protect cooperation on the international levels, and promote assistance in sensing states for their some future activities. For example, if they are having some prediction in regards to some earthquakes, maybe of some volcanic eruptions or any natural hazards to any nation state, that should be checked through remote sensing. And you know secondary data, for example, concerning the information of their territories, or maybe some indiscriminatory treatments done through these nation states interfering in their private affairs through remote sensing, should not be permitted. And these are these informations which are sensitive in the context of a nation state should not be remote sensed. So uh, these principles that were relating to remote sensing, in regards to added responsibility under the international law as an obligation to help each another, and through three activities to try and resolve various disputes that could result in a better application of the usage of remote sensing through outer space, right? And the second relevant draft principles that are for the usage of nuclear power and nuclear weapons and nuclear power sources. So in 1993, through the threat of emerging nuclear powers and nuclear power sources in outer space, the US had launched, a comprehensive safety assessment, which is to be conducted and made publicly available if we are to launch any space object which may have some radioactive material to the Earth, and launching it to the states, states that are concerned, which may have an impact through those nuclear or radioactive materials. The UN, in that context, said and responded promptly in order to have complete information and to consult before launching such radioactive material through satellites by other nation states, right? So even this outer space treaty and all these conventions which we discussed are basically to constitute the law relating to the outer space. So many provisions of these treaties and principles are not only binding on the nation states or the parties who are signatories to it, but also have gained acceptance, have gained have resulted into more acceptance and more for example consent through the nation state, that maybe that even the non-parties to these conventions are readily accepting and expressing their consent to these rules, which are actually the probably the wishful international law that is general international law, which are consequently accepted and are binding on all the states, because these laws which are to protect the other nation states are morely are lessly quite effective, and they are readily accepted through various nation states, whether they are party to these conventions or whether they are not party. So even though we the above discussed with the treaties which we have just discussed uh, may not be very effective in outer space. On the this is on the contradiction to another notion. So because again these treaties are based on consensual measures. As I told you, international law is ultimately a weak law. It had made the nation states accept its rules and regulations widely. And because they are based on the very facts that they are important. But the treaties are such decided because they must be beneficial to all the nation states. And while it comes to decision making, it lacks its control, right? For settlement of the mechanism of settlement of disputes is in question always. So we need to have a more impactful and a separate organization in order to, you can say, governance of outer space, to have some binding upon these, or you can say some have impactful resolution systems in order to execute these conventions. Similarly, if we talk about arms race, so arms race in outer space is all the more relevant. And these principles that we discussed about exploration, that we have provided as freedom of exploration through the outer space by various nation states. So the backdrop of this is that the nation states might secretly conduct some military activities or launch some, or you can say, disastrous missiles or weapons of mass destructions. Now, recognizing this, various UN and its bodies, tried to incorporate, tried to defend these deficiencies, stating that there is, there should be a legal regime to implement the Outer Space Treaty and to control the arms race in the outer space. To prevent these arms race, or you can say control this arms race, is probably to have become a superpower, or may become have some the type of weapons of mass destruction in order to destroy various nations and countries, right? So the non-acceptance of military uses of outer space, such as even through the remote sensing. The positive remote sensing is different, and negative remote sensing is different. So, usage of arms race through remote sensing, or maybe through navigation or communication, or even predicting weather forecasts in order to destroy some nation state, are to be checked and are not mentioned particularly in the Outer Space Treaty. So the Space Treaty, the use of Outer Space Treaty for the purpose of military usages have actually given the rise to, this freedom have actually given the rise to the arms race. Okay, so there were around, you can say, 18 to 1900 satellites which were launched in order to orient missiles while there was a Cold War between USA and USSR, between after the Second World War through 1980s. So these explorations of Unispace 1 and 2 and 3 were conducted. So many of them were engaged through this Unispace 1. So Unispace 1 is particularly the first United Nations conference on exploration and peaceful uses of outer space. This was to examine the practical benefits of space activities and the opportunities that are available, you can say, for the non-space powers to participate in those activities. So the development of space science and technology through international cooperation was encouraged, and few countries who are technologically advanced were deriving more benefits of space. So in order to check this uh, exploration strategies, or what do you call this, having space research and cooperating with the developing and the underdeveloped countries, an increased usage of such technology, transfer of this technology and its applications, increased cooperation between the developed as well as developing countries in outer space. So Unispace 1 is probably uh, the first conference that was resulting in freedom of exploration and keeping a few checks on these explorations. Okay, so even though we need to had the arm to prevent, in order to prevent the arms race, there was a need to have a committee on disarmament. The disarmament is inclusive of conducting nuclear explorations in space, under space activities, in order to control such a task, or you can say such a competition between the nation states of having stronger and more powerful nuclear powers. So there was a committee on disarmament that was set up in order to prevent the arms race in outer space in 1982. So through this, in order to check the superpowers and their arms race, particularly USA and USSR, because of the Cold War that was being conducted between them. So they were to be, this could be harmful for probably the whole of the nations or probably the international community at large. Okay. So also, Space 2 was on the same principles, that was in order to, check technology and its transfer, and in order to discuss various corporations through cooperation and increased cooperation between the developed and the developing countries in outer space. So they were having similar principles that was discussed one by one in Unispace 1, Unispace 2, and Unispace 3. In Unispace 3, the result was that there was a declaration that was made. The first foremost objective of these series of conferences was to promote effective means of using space technology and assisting the solutions, having solutions to the problems of regional and which are regional or of global significance. So they tried and pointed out that how these explorations should be benefiting the regional as well as uh, sorry, am I audible, class? Global significance. Yes, okay. So another objective of these conferences was to strengthen the capabilities and ensure that member states of UN, the countries of who are the members of the UN, should be adopting the use of application of space research for developmental purposes only. That is, maybe economic development, maybe social development, maybe cultural development. Okay, right. So these are some outlooks. These were to strengthen the developing nations, to strengthen that developed nations should help the developing nations and prevent the arms race between the superpowers. that these activities that are conducted should be helpful in proper research, space research for the benefit of economics, social and cultural development of various developing countries. So this conference, in regards to space and its development, had an action plan for peaceful uses of outer space in the 21st century in particular. So the conference actually focused on developing a practical framework to maximize the usage of these space technology, but through international cooperation. Is it clear? Yes, class. Is it clear? Any questions so far? No questions? Shall I move forward? Yes, class, am I audible? Class, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it clear until now? Shall I move forward to the next topic of the moon and other celestial bodies?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So moon and other celestial bodies. So, while we talk about the moon, we also need to recognize and have an impact that moon and celestial bodies, and particularly containing outer space, is not a subject to having any part of sovereignty over it. The state should not have any sovereignty by means of occupation. It should be open to all. It should be, implied that moon can never be, a part or area having some control of a particular state or its territory. So moon is not to be, or any celestial body is not to be a part, or you can say a holding of any state territory. Rather, moon and its natural resources, celestial bodies and its various resources should be and are common heritage to mankind. So, common heritage to mankind is something what we have for the high seas, for what we have for the outer space, the moon, the celestial bodies, right? So, there was an agreement that was encouraged, and through, we can say, there was a committee that was set up. The agreement that was made in regards to the, you can say, you know, in exclusively in relation to the moon and other celestial bodies. So there was a resolution which was conducted, and a committee that we just discussed for the peaceful uses of outer space also drafted an international treaty in regards to moon. So there were, for instance, if I tell you, in uh, 1972, there was a draft agreement that made to have a resolution for the agreement that was the moon agreement. It particularly mentioned that the moon shall include its orbits, other trajectories, or the things that revolve around the moon should be in open for all the mankind, right? The state parties shall have the right and shall have the freedom to explore and use of moon without any discrimination of any kind, right? That should be basis of equality in accordance to international law and the provisions of the Moon Agreement, right? So this was in order to establish an international regime that such exploration should become feasible. And state parties are informed through the UNO that they are open to public and it is open to the whole global nation states, that all the natural resources for the purposes of exploration maybe that are discovered and feasible for facilitating any, you can say, discoveries, etc., that are conducted on the moon should be in accordance to international scientific community. Okay. Thereafter, providing international regime for various safe development of such resources of the moon, and management of such natural resources should be done, and the expansion of having conducting such explorations or the opportunities that are there, there should be an equitable sharing of states and its benefits for these resources. Okay, so all these were given in the Moon Agreement of 1984. Is it clear? This was about the Moon Agreement. And thereafter, the celestial bodies, etc., that are to be, in order to check the similar ideas of explorations and natural resources and sending of satellites into the various celestial bodies like planets, maybe stars, etc. Right? They were to be checked and under should be through the international regime. Right? Lastly, I would want to discuss with you a very small topic that is about, again, based on the very famous movie, a series of movies that are called Star Wars. Star Wars, in order to check the military oriented satellites and its activities in outer space, prohibition of such techniques or systems of such satellites which have their major focus on arms race in outer space. So they had uh, they were resuming a development of SDI. SDI hereby means strategic defense initiatives. So there were a lot of nuclear weapons or even nuclear missiles that were launched in 1980s. As I told you about the Cold War systems. So, in order to, express the superiority, or you can say, or to have a competition of arms race, in order to express their supremacy over one another. Through the medium, again, there was a Cold War between USA and the Soviet Union. So these missiles were launched that are space-based ballistic missiles that are for the benefit of the defense of one's country, basically. But um this program is famously, popularly known as Star Wars, right? So the star-based defense initiatives were there, and there were missiles that were launched. But the term war was not there because this was prohibited, and it was the object of the program was to intercept and destroy various strategic plastic missiles in outer space with their targets. So the development of SDI was in order to check and the development of such activities that were to prevent such wars in the outer space in future. Okay, so these development activities, in order to see the component moves from the various labs of testing, these were both accepted by USA and USSR that no country should be testing any nuclear, weapons or nuclear satellites that were to be launched. You know, then anti-ballistic missiles was a clear violation, and this was again, there was a partial ban treaty of 1977 that was in order to check these missiles, military, or you can say nuclear missiles that have to be launched in the outer space, right? So as long as we talk about its legality, it was illegal as these missiles were sent to outer space in order to express supremacy or threat to the another countries. But since now the Cold War has ended, so its implications thereby started to reduce. Right? Is it clear? So last topic is about Antarctica. The first, again, Antarctica is like the southernmost continent, South Pole. It remained uninhabited and unexplored. Again, just for the reference of academics, it was there on our textbooks. But with the advancement of science and technology, now you might have seen various, expeditions happening in Antarctica, various people going and living there for some adventure purposes. So there were, a lot of, due to the development of science and technology, we could be able to explore Antarctica as well. So this, in the 1950s, these expeditions were launched. And in order to, uh, uh, in order to have the pursuance of the, agreed, the that the flora and fauna of Antarctica should be preserved. The natural resources, you can say, there was, with the time, there was a treaty that nuclear weapons, including radioactive waste from various nation states, or you can say some throwing of wastage should be prohibited at least until such an agreement must be signed that the sovereignty claims should be banned, and that states should actively consent that Antarctica is again a common heritage of mankind, and their flora and fauna should be saved, their living resources should be saved, and the regulation on usage of exploration should be checked, and there should not be any dispensation or involving Antarctica and using Antarctica as as a base for any testing of nuclear weapons or maybe disposing of radioactive waste. So there were two conventions that were signed. The first is the Convention on Conservation of Antarctica Seals of 1972, and also the Convention on Conservation of Antarctica Marine Living Resources of 1980. They were concluded to regulate Antarctica as and conserve its use of living resources and protection of such exquisite flora and fauna, right? And there were many protocols in order to protect environment, and the protocols that were conducted through the Antarctica Treaty of 1991. Okay, so Antarctica regime is presently regulated and is a part of a Washington Treaty. So these systems are uh, again, as I told you, Antarctica is a common heritage of mankind, and exploitation and you can say check from various nation states, perhaps in order to exploit Antarctica's resources and to maintain peace and security in Antarctica, protection of its environment, conservation of its resources, management of international activities on the land of Antarctica, and other equitable sharing of such resources and benefits of such exploitation are basically about this the treaty, the Antarctica Treaty. Okay. So lastly, even India has accepted this treaty of the Antarctica Treaty, and it again the treaty is sent for scientific exploitation. And India has also conducted a few scientific work in different fields. So, the there were a few expeditions that were turned out to be benefited, and India keeps, sending expeditions to Antarctica, and such decisions are made, and is a part of active decision making of Antarctica and its conferencing relating to Antarctica. So, is it clear? Yes, class. Any doubts so far? Now, I think since this topic is over, let me start another topic that is about peaceful resolution, dispute resolution, right? So, is this clear? Any doubt in this particular topic of outer space, moon, and Antarctica, or space law in particular? So, as far as your next topic is concerned, we'll be discussing about the settlement of disputes. So, the very first thing about this topic is how do we settle disputes? How do nation states resolve their disputes? Just give me a moment. I'll just be back. Give me 2 minutes. Let me upload the slide in the meantime. Yes, class, is it visible? Have I sent you? Yes, class, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's
Talk,
visible, ma'am.
talking about the settlement of dispute. So disputes are generally the contradictions of laws or conflict of laws, or you can say um, of maybe some facts or maybe some, in order to, there is some conflict between two or more nation states, right? Maybe for the interest of two persons or two nation states in particular, there is some disagreement, there is non acceptance of facts, non agreement, or you can say maybe the two nation states have diverse views on some point of interest, common interest. So these disputes are to be resolved, are to be, amicably resolved through various methods, so that the wars are kept in check. So generally, what had happened was, when we talk about dispute resolution systems, either we focus on the wars which had devastated so many nation states in particular, right? So in this topic, in this basically this uh, unit, we will be talking about means of dispute resolution. So there may be legal disputes, there may be political disputes, right? We will be focusing upon the legal disputes. So political disputes are very rare that it could be resolved because they do not hold any backing upon. So legal disputes may be resolved through discussion or may be resolved through a particular method, right? So the two means of settlement of disputes are first amicable or pacific means, and the second is the compulsive or coercive means. So these two are the various basic types of resolution systems or means to execute a settlement between such disagreements, such disputes. So we will be continue this topic tomorrow in our next class, and one by one I'll be talking about firstly the amicable means, that are the peaceful means of dispute resolution, and about the second part, that is coercive or compulsive means, that is through maybe some coercive or forceful means or forceful measures that are used, right? So I end the class here because it's already time. Let me download your attendance and we'll discuss about this topic tomorrow. Any questions if you have from the previous, discussion? We will be taking it tomorrow. Sorry for the interruption. Let me download the attendance. Yes. Okay. So I'm downloading the attendance. Thank you, class. Thank you so much. I'll be ending the class now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.